Are you looking for deeper experiences while you travel? You know, the ones that go beyond the tourist traps? Or maybe you're just searching for answers or clarity. In this episode, you'll learn that the secret to unlocking transformational travel is actually right in the kitchen. Welcome to Transform with Travel, a show helping busy professionals plan more bucket list trips that reignite adventure and go beneath the surface without the overwhelm of planning, the endless midnight scroll, and the crowded tourist traps. Buckle up because we are about to take off. In this episode, we hear Chef Shannon Smith's story where you'll discover how to unlock deeper cultural experiences with respect and curiosity, that flexibility and spontaneity are more important than a rigid itinerary, and how food and culture are at the heart of understanding humanity, one meal at a time. Are you hungry for more? Let's dig in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Transform with Travel. I'm your host, Kelly Tolliday, and I am here today with Shannon Smith, who is a chef, author, world traveler, and passionate storyteller. She's traveled to over 50 countries, and now she has her incredible, beautiful cookbook out called The Hidden Table, which shares recipes and stories of her travels all around the world. So thank you so much for being here today, Shannon.
It is a pleasure. Thank you for asking me to be on here.
I was so excited to receive your cookbook and be able to go through it. And I realized that it's a lot more than just a cookbook. It's a beautifully curated storytelling experience. Honestly, it weaves in culture, it weaves in humanity, stunning pictures. It could literally be just a coffee table book, if anything else. If someone was like, I don't really like to cook, but I love beautiful pictures, it's there for you. And what I really loved was the generational stories that were woven into it, like the women and the people that shared their stories with you and how you wove that into the recipe itself. I think just it shares such a beautiful story of different countries around the world. I've appreciated the art that it took to bring this together.
Thank you. It was a labor of love for
I'm
sure.
sure. Yeah.
I do tell people that even if you don't cook or don't ever prepare one recipe out of the book, read the stories because it's about those people that I learned from that brings me the most joy and was the most heartfelt part of writing that book.
Absolutely. You could definitely tell it was a people centric, a story centric cookbook coming together
Yeah.
and part of your journey. So what I really loved was at the beginning, the very beginning of your introduction. And for those watching on YouTube, we have the beautiful book right here. I love the pictures and yeah, it's just stunning. But I loved the first paragraph kind of summed it up for me with the experience of reading through the book. What it says, the kitchen table is one of the most important places for human connection. It's not only a place where meals are shared, but it's a place where accomplishments are celebrated, stories are told, sins are confessed, and relationships are formed. And I love that you started with that because it does really give you an indication of how it is about the stories and the people. And I think there's one line in your book that says something like, even if the meal itself wasn't that good, the conversations and the people like amplified that. And I think a lot of us can relate to a story, something like that, where it's the story you walk away with rather than the meal. I don't know if you found that to be the case for you when you were traveling.
I always find that the case. People ask me about my favorite foods or my favorite meals, and that's secondary to me. For me, the memories are much more about those people that I got to meet in those travels that I sat at their table. The name of the book is The Hidden Table because it tells many of the stories and the recipes from people who invited me to their, and I say in quotes, hidden tables, which are places that most people would not have ever found. They're not touristy. And I've just been very fortunate to be included at many of those little tables where I walked away with such memories and information and things that I wanted to pass on to the reader and to people that I teach.
Yeah, truly. I'm thinking of right now experiences where, let's say we did a cooking class in India or we did a cooking class somewhere and we were in someone's home. And oftentimes people want the big and the fancy and they want the big kitchen and they want the chef. And it's those experiences of being inside this woman's home where her little 5-year-old's like peeping her head out and you're using her pans and you're using her spices and the herbs that they picked from, the grandma that picked out of the garden. It's like not always about the Michelin star star or the fanciest kitchen in the world. Like you said, it's those hidden tables that not everyone gets a chance to experience. And we're going to talk a little bit about how you keep getting invited to these hidden tables. But first, I'd love for you to kind of start and share a bit about your story. I know you started your culinary career at 40. What was that moment that made you say, okay, I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to start, a new career, a new path?
Well, my first career was a seamstress. I was a custom clothier, did that for about 10 years. That's what I studied in college and graduate school. I actually have a degree in home economics, and which includes cooking. But at the time, I wasn't interested in cooking. I didn't come from a home where my mother loved to cook. She cooked, but and provided a meal every night on the table, but it wasn't something she particularly enjoyed. So I didn't get things passed on to me from her nor from my grandmothers. But sewing was just something I enjoyed. After 10 years of that career, for many different reasons, I wanted to make a change, and including getting a divorce. And I had two young children.
Mm,
And my attorney said, Shannon, if you want sole custody of your kids, you've got to prove to the judge that you can support them. Because at the time, this is back in the early 90s, I was just taking cash and checks and not really keeping good records of my income. And so I was offered a job teaching kids at a apartment complex that was state funded and teaching them life skills and particularly cooking. They wanted me to teach them how to cook, how to use their food stamps that were being given to their families and use them in a more healthy way.
mm.
And so I would go into this apartment and that they provided for me and teach these kids that came after school, and I loved it. I absolutely loved the teaching and I loved the cooking, and I wanted to learn more. And I was around 38 at that time. And so I was doing that. They were asking me to teach at other places too, and a home for unwed mothers through a different charity. And so I was kind of going all around town teaching mostly underserved people how to cook. And I loved it. So I decided to go to a little culinary school here in my hometown of Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I took every class they offered and eventually started traveling and doing it in that way, which is another chapter of the story. But that's how it all began.
Yeah. Wow. And you mentioned Tulsa, Oklahoma. That's where you're from. It's where Oklahoma is where you were born and raised. And you talk in the book about how your life was kind of self-contained to Oklahoma. And you talk about a great childhood of, being out on the farm, out on the land, out on the ranch, which to a person who was born and raised on the coast of Florida in a big bustling, metropolitan area, it feels like such a free childhood. I loved how you spoke about that. And you talk about how it was a great place to grow up. Can you share some of your first experiences overseas? I believe it was a study abroad experience in Austria. How did that, for like a girl growing up in Oklahoma to then studying in Austria, how did that change your mindset about the world and what was possible for yourself?
It changed me a lot. And I always tell students in college, if they have the opportunity to do a study abroad program, they really should do it. And for me, it was Vienna, Austria. And so I went with a group of 30 students from my university. And on the weekends, we would go, to other places in Europe. So I got to see a lot of Europe in 5 months. And I developed a little bit of an attitude, to be honest, and thought, I got to get out of Oklahoma. After I graduate, I'm done with this. I'm a world traveler now. And of course, I married an Oklahoma boy shortly after I returned and did not leave the country again for 15
Oh,
years.
wow.
So I learned so much. I was a poor college student. So there were a lot of things I didn't get to do, but I got to see a completely different light on the world. And it really made me think and made me realize that the world is not like we are in our little bubble here in Oklahoma. So it did. I always kept it on the back shelf thinking someday I'm going to get to go back.
And so when did that day come? You said that it had been 15 years since you went back to Europe. At the around the same time, you were also starting this new journey and this new venture into cooking. And I know now you've cooked in over 50 countries and met people from all around the world. But when did that start for you where you were like, okay, now's the time. I'm ready to go back? Like, how did that start for you?
Well, I got remarried to a man that loved to travel.
Oh, well, there you go.
There you go. So he started taking me around the world, and it was wonderful because we would go to these, cities and do the touristy things, visiting monuments and museums and, eating at nice restaurants. But at the time, I was taking all these cooking classes and really getting into cooking. And so when I was at these wonderful places, I'm looking around and seeing, these markets, and I'm seeing these street food vendors and these women walking down the street with a bag full of produce from the market. And I'm thinking, I want to get to know these people. I want to know where are they growing this and how did they make this? I'm in a restaurant going, what is this? I want to know the history behind this dish. And it was just eating on me, no pun intended, that I wanted to learn from these people. So I started doing research before we would go on a trip to see if I could find people that would teach me. And this was back in the 90s, end of the 90s, and it was not a trend at that time to take cooking classes abroad. It wasn't popular yet.
Mm.
So I had a difficult time finding people. But the very first person that I found was a woman named Diane Seed, and she was in Rome. And I found her on the internet, I believe. And I contacted her and I said, I'm going to be in Rome on this particular day. Can I take a cooking class from you? And she wrote me back and said, no, I only do 3-day classes.
Oh,
I said,
wow.
well, I'm not going to be there 3 days. Is there any way you'd make an exception? Well, and by the way, she's a British woman who has lived in Rome for 40 years. And she was very rigid and had an attitude, very spunky. And she writes me back the second time and says, nope, I'm sorry, 3 days is it. I contacted her a third time, and I don't remember what I said. I wish I still had that email stream, but she finally said, okay, come, I'll do it for one day.
She's like, this woman's
And
not going to stop. I just got to get her in.
yeah, that's right. And that's how I am. I'm so super curious, which I can talk about in a minute on how it's happened, throughout the world. But she changed my life because I went that one day and we cooked together in her apartment in Rome, and she could see how passionate I was about learning. In fact, she said, I've never seen anyone take so many notes as you have taken in this class. And she said, would you be interested in traveling with me? And she said, I'd lead these very small, what she called gourmet tours around the world. And these are like 3 or 4 people. And I said, I'd love to. So I met her the next year in Sicily. And then we went on to, I've traveled with her to Morocco, to India, Sri Lanka, throughout Italy, some other places. And I learned from her. I learned how to travel as a single female, which is what she did. I learned how to navigate through cities by myself. And that's when I started traveling alone
Hmm.
or meeting people. I was becoming more comfortable doing it that way. My husband at the time, we're no longer married, but he was very encouraging and really prompted me to do this and to pursue this dream that I had of learning food throughout the world. He wasn't that interested in that part of it. So he just let me go, and I have been doing that for over 20 years.
Wow. I really love that you kind of piece in when in history this was, because as you mentioned, there was no, cooking class on TripAdvisor or Viator, or, they're
Right.
everywhere now. And it's actually something we've had the podcast for 2 years. We have not talked about culinary travel really. We've talked about food for, people talk about culture and food on the podcast, of course, but we haven't really spoken much about going somewhere specifically for the food experience
Mhm.
or to learn from a chef or a local in that way, which I think is a really interesting piece of culture that gets left out a lot. Of course, people have great meals when they're abroad, and perhaps you go to a specific restaurant for a specific type of meal. But I think there's a really important piece about culture and story here that gets left out of the food being left out of that equation. And we were just in Peru, me and a group that I led down in Peru, and a lot, like every meal we were explained, okay, well, this corn came from this place, and the reason why this corn's bigger than that corn. And we just learned so much about what it means to these people. And I really loved in part of the book where you wrote about this Italian experience with your friend, and you mentioned that by bringing me to their hidden tables, these Italian friends were feeding both my palate and my soul. As I learned about Italian cooking, I also learned about myself. And I feel like anyone that has such a rich experience with people and their food around the world, you really get a sense of culture and you get a sense of yourself in such a different way. It's kind of hard to explain, but your book does such an amazing job at explaining that. I'd love to hear how you continue to meet, or across these 50 countries now that you've cooked in and met people, how do you find that you get invited to these hidden tables? Because travel is travel. There's millions of people around the world, and there's more of these like touristy type cooking classes now. Like what's your secret to kind of going beneath the surface from a food perspective?
Well, I'm a very curious person. And as you heard in the previous story, I don't take no for an answer, but I'm very interested. And I have a way of just showing people that I truly care about them and that I'm not just trying to learn how to cook something. I want to get to know the person. So there are many ways that I meet these people. I mentioned 80 people in the book who influenced me. And by asking a lot of questions, by paying attention. One of the ways that I find people is that I ask guides. If I hire a guide in a particular city, I will tell them, I give them a little background on me and what I love to learn. And I ask them, do you know anyone that might be able to teach me? Or do you know of a particular market where you could take me, where the tourists don't go, that's for the locals? Or do you know a fisherman that might, show me what he does for during the day? And so I ask a lot of those questions. When I travel alone, I, of course, eat alone generally. And I meet people in restaurants. I will always sit at the bar if it's available, and that's where I have my dinner. And I will talk to the people around me. I'll talk to the bartender. I'll tell them, because they'll ask, "What are you doing here? Why are you alone?" And I tell them, and I can't tell you how many people have said, "Oh my gosh, you need to meet my grandmother, or you need to go to this place." And I have made many connections that way. Also, of course, the internet. I search in Instagram, social media. It's amazing. I will follow chefs or I will follow individuals who really interest me in food, and they may be someone abroad. And if I'm going to that place, I'll contact them and say, "I'm coming, can we meet? Can you teach me? Can you take me here?" An example of that is I'm very interested in salt. I'm fascinated by salt. And I had seen, I believe, on social media about a place called Colima, Mexico. It's on the western coast, and they are known for many things. It's a beautiful, lush rainforest place. It's a state, very small in Mexico, but they cultivate sea salt in a very unique and historical way. And I'd been reading about it, and then I see that there's this chef in Colima who is helping promote the salt that they harvest and to protect that place and to promote the people that have been working there their whole lives. And I'm reading his stories. He had a little restaurant called La Sal. And so I contacted him. I said, "I want to come, and will you take me to the salt pans, and can we look at salt, and I want to see how it's done?" And he said, "Yes, I'll do that for you." And I said, "Well, can I come next month?" He said, "No, because it's going to be covered in water. That's when the high tide, you have to come in April." And okay. So I went in April, and I took my photographer with me. She travels with me a lot, especially for the book. And this was actually after the book had gone to print. So actually the back cover has a picture of
Ooh.
Colima, Mexico. We were able to slide in one
Oh, here
photo.
you go. Lots of
Yeah.
salt.
So
Wow.
Chef Nico spent 2 days with us and took us to the salt pans, took us to little restaurants. Now, yes, I did. I paid him,
Right. Right.
a nominal fee. Not everyone, I mean, they're working. Of course, I'm going to pay them something. But he was so thankful that this American woman cared about them. And I ended up bringing 80 pounds of salt home with me. And I actually sell the Kalima salt, but that's just one way was I found him on Instagram.
Mm,
I have another story also in Mexico, and that was toward the end of the pandemic when we could not, as Americans, travel to Europe. It still wasn't open to us. Mexico became available. And I was just, of course, itching like everyone else to travel. So I went to Mexico. And I hadn't spent a lot of time there. I had, done the beaches and, girl trips, but I hadn't really gotten into Mexico. And so I was with some friends and I was getting a massage. And the man who was giving the massage was asking what I do. And I said, "Do you know anyone that could teach me how to cook Mexican food, particularly from this area?" This was in the state of Nayarit, Mexico.
hmm
He said, "I don't, but I will give me your number and I'll contact you if I can think of someone." About 2 weeks later, he texted me and he said, "I remember your ask." And he said, "I've heard of this woman named Alondra. She just wrote a cookbook on her state of Nayarit, and she did all this research. And I think she teaches, but here's her number. A friend of mine gave me her number." So I messaged her and I told her I'd really love to learn from her. And so a few months later, I go back to Mexico. I spent 4 days with her cooking. We became best friends. She ended up taking me to Mexico City the following year, introduced me to other friends there. My friend Paco, who she introduced me to, is a culinary guide, and he has taken me to probably 10 different places in Mexico
Wow.
and introduced me to the most fascinating people, particularly women. And that's what I write about in the chapter on Mexico,
hmm
are these women that I met who are just amazing. They're all single for several reasons, but they're entrepreneurial and they're all in the food or spirits, liquor industry. And they just embraced me and taught me, and we've remained great friends. I love Mexico. I truly have a real heart for them.
What I'm hearing while you're speaking about your story is that there's two pieces of this. Correct me if I'm wrong, but one is your ability, which I love this, your ability to go out there and ask for what you want and also not be afraid of the rejection. They could just say, "No, I'm sorry, I don't want to help you." Like you take that risk of being the first person to reach out because it's a pretty like obscure thing that you're trying to find, right? So one is the ability to go out and say hello to a stranger and ask for what you want. And then two, it seems like to me, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like to me that you have very little expectation. Like you let the curiosity guide you. You're not expecting something to go to a specific plan because of the thousands of reviews that you found online, because a lot of these experiences, you don't have this on TripAdvisor, you don't have this on Google. It seems like you really let life surprise you and you let that particular expert in whatever region of the world, let them show you what they want to show you. Like I feel like that's such a beautiful way to travel is take the risk and be the first to say, "Hi, I'm here. Like I want to learn." And then the other piece of that is the expectation, like letting it just unfold the way it's supposed to. That's at least what I'm hearing from your story.
That's right. And I also not knowing always what I'm going to get myself into, not having expectations. I have to be prepared for anything. And what I mean is it's not always the most pleasant experience as far as comfort
Mhm.
goes. For
Mhm.
example, when I did go to the salt pans in Colima, it was extremely windy, it was extremely hot. We were there all day and we were actually waiting for the sunset because it was remarkable. We were raking salt, so it wasn't comfortable, but I was learning and I was helping. There are other times, in Mexico where, or any place, let's see, Morocco, I was in a home and it was raining and we were outside and we're getting wet, but we're cooking tagines over fire. And you have to go with the flow and know that this is their life. And I've had many experiences like that. I've cooked in Dominican Republic with no electricity, no running water, and we're out under a hut, on dirt floors having the most marvelous time. But it was uncomfortable, and that's okay. If you really want to learn about a culture, you have to be able to adapt to that culture and
Mhm.
sometimes be uncomfortable.
Oh, I really love that. That's something that I really try to impart on our travelers that come with us on group travel is kind of trusting in the unknown and trusting that it's going to work out, even if it's a little uncomfortable. Actually, in that discomfort comes the other side of that of so much joy and so much appreciation for what you have. And the other piece of that is not placing a right or a wrong. Like you said, this is their way of life, and our way of life is no better or no worse. Like it is what it is, and this is where you are. I think that allows you to go deeper with the people that you're meeting, and probably why so many people trust you around the world to bring you into their homes. It's not an average experience of most travelers these days. We're often seeing things on such a surface level, and you've had such a special experience of getting to connect with people so deeply. Summertime and the living's easy, especially when you have Best Day Brewing packed in your cooler. Just because you're not drinking alcohol doesn't mean you have to miss out on creating core memories this summer. Beach time, boat days, dips in the lake, and so much more. That's where Best Day Brewing comes in. Brewed in Northern California and crafted for the doers, the trailblazers, the summertime warriors, the adventurers. Yes, that's you. Best Day creates the perfect non alcoholic beer for life's special moments. And better yet, you can earn $2 back via PayPal or Venmo when you purchase one pack of Best Day Brewing at participating retailers from now until July 30th. I know that you have been to so many countries and you've met people from all around the world. However, the book can't go on for thousands of pages. So, how did you decide which countries that you would include in your book? Then you drill it down to which recipes, because there's hundreds of recipes that you could choose from. But which of these countries like really made such an impact on you to decide, okay, I'm going to include this in my book?
Well, the book has 12 chapters, and each chapter is from a different place in the world from where I've traveled and cooked. I started this book 7 years ago. It took me 6 years to write it.
Wow.
And so I would do it a little bit differently now because I've had so many more experiences since I began this book. But at the time, I chose 6 places that were very meaningful at that time. Many of them I would keep in a book if I started over. But when I say places, it's not just countries. Many of them are countries. One is a chapter on India, one on Italy, Israel, Spain. But then when I got to like South America, I started to name the chapter South America. But then I realized I haven't been to all, there are a lot of countries in South America and like I haven't been to Brazil. And I thought, I can't name it South America if I haven't even been to Brazil. But I've been to all the countries on the Andes Mountains: Peru, Chile, Argentina, and Colombia. So I thought, well, I'll name this chapter The Andes of South America because I've been there and I've cooked in all those countries. The only chapter in the book that is from the United States is the chapter on New Mexico, which is a state, of
Hmm.
course, in the United States. And I use that one. It's a very important place for me because my mother is from there, my grandparents. And I am a huge fan of chilies, all kinds of chilies. In fact, I collect dried chilies from around the world and bring them home. But it's just the cuisine of New Mexico is so important to me that I had to include that in the book. So the way I chose those places was just at the time they were important to me, and many of them still are. The recipes were yes, it was hard to choose those recipes. There's about 10 per chapter. I also said when I began this, I want every recipe to have a photo. And my photographer, Valerie Wayhouse, and we've worked together for 10 years. And every single photo of the food was taken in front of my living room window. And every single, I think there are 120 recipes. Not one time is a dish repeated, as in the vessel that the food is presented on. So I have a beautiful collection of platters and plates and different serving things. I also collect those. And so my point is, there was a lot of thought put into the book, not just the stories, but also the way they were photographed and presented. It's hard to, like, for Indian food, Sometimes it's hard to make Indian food look beautiful.
Mm.
It tastes so good, and it's one of my favorite cuisines to cook. I've been to India 4 times, and I love making Indian food. I have a tandoor oven in my
Oh,
backyard that I
wow.
but making it look pretty was a challenge. It's the same with Moroccan food. Morocco was one of the chapters, and making a tagine, dish look beautiful is hard. So what I did was when I was on my most recent trip to Morocco, I bought a lot of beautiful tagines, which is the vessel. A tagine is not only the stew that's cooked in the tagine, but also the vessel.
Right.
And so sometimes you can make food look pretty in the vessel that it is presented on.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of thought put into it.
Yeah, for sure. You can tell the intentionality. And I think, I mean, I haven't been to everywhere that's in your book, but for me, the recipes that you've included are they are like representations or symbolizations of symbols of that country. Like when I got to the Indonesia page, and I've spent a lot of time in Indonesia, I could like viscerally feel and taste that country from the dishes that you were describing, like the sambal and the chicken satay and the shrimp and the bumbu soup. Like everything that you included, I felt like accurately represented the place or the country, the destination really well. And I was like, wow, she's really covered. Like I just got back from Peru and I saw the causa and I saw the ceviche, and you really did a good job at bringing the flavor to life through the book of the country.
Thank you. That's a very big compliment, and I take that very seriously. Thank you for
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. Of all the places that you've cooked, is there any like one kitchen that just like completely surprised you? Maybe you went in with no expectation and was just like blown away. Is there anything that comes to mind?
Off the top of my head, in Chile, which I love the country of Chile. I'm just fascinated. The Atacama Desert up in the north is one of my favorite places in the world. But down in the south, I was in Patagonia, and I was, let's see, the place where I was staying, I had a guide for like a week, and I told them that I wanted to learn to cook. And they'd never been asked that before. Everybody wants to hike
Right.
and fish and horseback ride and glacier ski and all that, but I wanted to cook. And they're like, okay, we'll see what we can do. So one day they took me to this ranch, and it was so beautiful. You can imagine if you've been to Patagonia, it's surrounded by mountains. And there was a father and son that lived in this little house, and they were both named Nesper. And they were both they trained race horses. That's what they did. This is all coming back to me. They trained race horses, and the mother and the wife had died. So it was just the two of them, the father and the son. And they raised sheep. And it's very common in Patagonia to eat lamb. And at the time, it was the springtime. And so they were told that I was coming, that I wanted to learn to cook. I'm not sure why they were chosen for this to teach me. But when I arrive, the father was the cook. And so they had slaughtered a lamb that morning, and they had built this big fire, and I love fire. I love cooking with fire. I have 8 grills where I cook with fire here at my house. And so they built this fire, and we cooked a lamb that day outside. And then I went into the kitchen where the father was making bread, and he was cutting up more meat, and I was cooking with him. The son was tending to the fire. And so while the lamb was cooking, he said, "Do you want to go on a ride with me on a horse?" And I said, "Sure." So he and I go. I mean, it was so spontaneous. I had no idea what was going to happen that day. And we go on this beautiful horseback ride and come back, and it's about time. The lamb is about done. And we sit in their little kitchen and eat the most amazing lamb of my entire life. And it's so simple. And I remember we had sliced tomatoes and bread, and that was it. And it was one of the most memorable meals I've ever had.
Wow.
I think I wrote about them in the book. You'd think I would remember, but because I've written so many stories. They had a big impact on me. But that something so simple
Mhm.
could be so delicious, but it was more the experience that they gave me around that meal.
Yeah. I feel like as you were talking, it feels like it's like expedition travel, but with a culinary twist to it. That's what it feels like to me. Like you're just like up for the adventure and you have like a goal in mind that you want to learn how to cook, but you're open to however that journey takes you. It's so adventurous and it's honestly it's really inspiring, Shannon, because I'm also a travel advisor and I plan travel for people. And what I've been finding lately is there's a lot of expectation that every minute to every second of the day will be planned to a T and it'll go to plan exactly how you plan it, right? Like there's no problems, it's stress free, all the words that we use to like market travel advising. What would you say to someone who's like, wow, that sounds like the adventure of a lifetime, but I'm nervous for that uncertainty, or I'm nervous? Like, how do I trust in the unknown? How do I just get on the back of a horse with some random Chilean guy that I just met? Like, what would you say to that type of traveler? Because I'm feeling so inspired right now that I want everyone to understand the magic of spontaneity and the magic of letting the day unfold.
I understand that everyone has different personalities, and some people are a little more adventurous, and some people are more fearful. And I can be that way too. But I think it's most important that people go into an adventure or something unexpected with flexibility. And if you go into a situation knowing that it may not go exactly the way you expect, and it may be a whole lot better, or it may not be quite as good as you were anticipating, you're going to enjoy it more if you just are more open minded. There are times when I have gone into a cooking class, for example, and into someone's home to cook, and it went on all day. And I was tired, but I was respectful because this person is spending his or her time with me. So there's that. There's also, people offer me food that I might not really want to try, things that I'm a little hesitant about, but out of respect, I always try what I'm offered. And just knowing the joy that that person got from seeing me enjoy their food, that's flexibility in my mind that I've tried that. And that's, I think there are a lot of people that are such finicky eaters. And if you want to go out and be adventurous about food and learn about a culture's food, you need to have flexibility and be willing to try things that you might not think you like.
Yeah, for sure. And I love how you mention here the kind of going on the flexibility piece that while most of the recipes are straightforward and don't involve special techniques, some require a fair amount of time and a little bit of patience. Don't be intimidated by ingredients that may not be familiar to you or that aren't as easily sourced. And I really love that you point that out because I think it's easy for somebody to be like, oh, no, too many things I don't know, moving on. And like the whole point of this book is opening your mind up to something new and trying something new, even if the end result maybe the meal doesn't taste as good because you didn't know how to cook it and you get better with time. I really loved that because I think it's so easy for us to just be like, nope, too many random ingredients. I can't just go to my local grocery store. I have to go to this random North African grocery store now. And my like, where do I find that? And I love that because I think that's such a piece of travel is not to be intimidated by something new.
That's right. And visit your international grocery stores in your town. I mean, it's so interesting. Sometimes I'll go into the one here we have in Tulsa, and sometimes I feel like I'm the only American in the place, and I'm in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I don't realize how many people from other countries live here until you go to those grocery stores. So for me, it's an adventure and getting to find those ingredients. Plus, you can order just about anything on Amazon too.
That's so true.
Yeah, you really can. You can get them, very conveniently. So that's not the best excuse for not trying a recipe because
Yeah.
it's usually available.
And I love that you call it out there too. I think that's amazing. And then that the fact that those flavors will be staples in your kitchen pantry and you don't have to have that excuse anymore.
Right.
So to go on a slightly different take on travel, you also do quite a bit of work where you help women around the world kind of bridge the gap between the skills that you have and the needs of those women and those communities. And I'm sure having traveled to many different kitchens all around the world, you've met many women all around the world of all different backgrounds and races, religions, everything. And particularly, and you've mentioned these two countries, the trips to the Dominican Republic and India, it just sounds really powerful what you do there. Can you explain how your travel has now also transformed from not just a culinary expedition, but now also helping empower women around the world with skills that can change their families' lives?
Yes, this is something I started about 12 years ago, probably. I was given an opportunity to go to Dominican Republic and work with some women who had received microloans. It's a program called microfinance where they receive a small loan to start their own business. It might be, a $50 loan. But these are very impoverished people, and particularly women are the ones that are in these programs. So I got to go and teach them sewing skills and cooking skills, and this was kind of a reward thing for them if they were in good standing on their loans and they were attending their meetings to pay back those loans. They were given the opportunity to come to my class. So it wasn't necessarily me teaching them something that they could use in their business, but it was just something, a extracurricular reward for them. And I tell you, the experiences that I had with that, I did it on two different trips in Dominican Republic. Again, I mentioned it, there was no electricity, no running water. When you think of Dominican Republic, you think of the beautiful beaches and the big resorts,
Mhm.
and it's, gorgeous, but many people don't realize that just behind those hotels is extreme poverty. And that's where I was. And, it was just rewarding for me to be able to spend time with these women that most people don't know, from abroad. But my hope is that I gave them something too. I gave them a skill and just their attention. To see that this woman came to give them attention, to me, that's a gift. I've done it. I recently, a couple months ago, was in India. And this was a program, again, on the internet, just trying to find. I knew I wanted to go back to India, my fourth time, and I wanted to enjoy some, things that I hadn't done yet before. But I thought, I'm going over there. I want to spend some time, giving back and doing something meaningful. And I finally found a foundation in New Delhi that serves a women and children in a homeless shelter. And so I said, I'd like to come and I can teach these. This is what I know how to do. I know how to cook. I know how to teach sewing, and I know how to teach jewelry making because that's another hobby I have. And they said, well, we don't have a kitchen. So will you teach sewing and jewelry making? And so I went, and for 4 days, I sat on the floor, Indian style, and I'm telling you, it was painful. If you don't do that every day, it hurts. But I sat on the floor with 23 women, and we hand sewed bags and hot pads, and we made jewelry, we made bracelets. And some of those women will use those skills and try to get a job, which is my goal. But I look for things like that, for opportunities when I travel to just, give back as much as I can. I started a foundation this year, the Shannon Smith Charitable Foundation, with the intent of helping women and children who just need a break. Everybody has a skill. You just got to get a break and find someone that will give you a push and encourage. Sometimes it's just encouragement.
Yeah. How do you think these meeting these women from around the world, and you mentioned the women in Mexico, I think the headline of the Mexico chapter is like Women of Resilience or something like that. How have they shaped you and just your own understanding of who you are and kind of more of like that purpose-driven piece?
Probably the fact that the women that I've met, as I mentioned before, are all single. And I'm also a single woman, a businesswoman, and they are too. We all have different businesses. One of the women is in the mezcal industry, and one of the only females in Mexico that is a master. Another woman, Regina, has a goat farm. She's a single mom of 4 children. Then there is Rosalba, who has 2 boys, and she runs a little restaurant out of her home. And so these women, I think the fact that they're such wonderful single moms that work so hard and to not just to support their children and to set a good example for them, but they work hard in their community, and they all of them teach too. That's another remarkable thing that I see in them. So that's probably what I got most out of the women I met in Mexico. Paco, that I mentioned before, who introduced me to all those women, actually had a book signing for me in Mexico City last summer. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, who's going to come to this? My book is in English. And he called every single woman that I mentioned in that chapter, and they all came to Mexico
Oh,
City
wow.
from all over the country. Rosalba traveled like 6 hours on a bus. Regina traveled 2 hours. Alondra flew into Mexico City, and they
Wow.
came. There was 6 members of the press, and they all interviewed me, and most of them don't speak English. I had Paco translating the whole time. So I have a really special place in my heart for Mexico and the people I've met there. It's remarkable.
Hmm. You've mentioned a couple times encouraging and empowering and connecting with these women. Many of our listeners are in a season of reinvention, in a season of rediscovering purpose, male and female, across the board. And you've, what sounds like to me, been through several seasons of reinvention and rediscovering. And what would you say to someone who is craving more meaning in their life, especially after 40 or 50? And how do you think
Mhm.
travel can kind of be the vehicle for that?
Well, I will say I'm in the last month of my 50s right now.
Oh,
I'm gonna turn
congratulations.
I turn 60 next month.
Happy
My fif
birthday.
Thank you. My 50s, that was the best decade of my whole life.
Oh, I love that.
And, I have 2 grown children, and what is asked of me a lot by women is, well, they say, "My children just went to college. My husband's working or retired or whatever, and I feel like I don't know what to do with the rest of my life." And they may be approaching 50 or in their 50s, and they're like, "I need a purpose." And they ask me, "How did you do it?" And everybody does it differently. But my advice is to be curious, to figure out what you're good at. Everyone is good at something. Everyone has a skill. It might be reading, it might be gardening, it might be writing, or making jewelry or cooking, what or teaching. There's so many things that we can do. But then look for opportunities to use it. Some women want to start a business. Some women don't want to work, but they want to volunteer. So my advice is to figure out what you want to do and then get out there. Don't just sit and wonder what you're going to do. Ask questions. Find people that are doing things and ask them how they did it. If it's in travel, and that's what a lot of people want to do is travel, after their kids are gone, or maybe they get a divorce, or they want to travel with their husband or their partner. And there are so many ways to travel now, so many ways. And I do advise finding a travel consultant like you who has information. There are so many perks to that. You mentioned the trips that are curated where, every day is very scheduled. I admit I love those trips too, and I do them. I just got back from South Africa, 2 weeks in South Africa, and it was completely planned out by my travel agent because I knew on that trip I needed rest.
Hmm.
I had come from Rwanda. I was on my way somewhere else, and I had this 2 weeks, and it was perfect for me because I didn't have to think about it. I knew where I was going to stay and all the activities. So I encourage that also because sometimes that's what we need.
Yeah, for sure.
But as far as travel, as you know, there's all different levels of pricing and different ways to do things. So if that's what you want to do, find someone that knows about it.
Yeah. Again, it comes back to what seems like a part of your personality, but very action oriented. Like, okay, you can have all these dreams, but what are you going to do to go after it? You could have sat around and been like, oh, that'd be nice to learn from this chef, or it would be nice to do this. No, like you went and you sent the message, and the worst case scenario is they don't respond. I think that's such a big lesson is like the Nike slogan, just do it. Like you have this idea, you know what you want to do. What's the next step to get there? And I really love that is that's how you get the hardest step is your first one, right? And I feel like the more that you do those first scary steps, the easier it is to take the next one. And yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a time and place for the vacations where you can turn your brain off and you know exactly where you need to go in. And then there's the vacations where you want to go a little bit deeper or have a little bit more grit, a little more adventure. And I think there's a time and place for both for sure.
That's
Absolutely.
true.
So I'm going to ask you a couple of fun and fast lightning round questions. We normally have 3 questions that we end our episodes with, but I have been so inspired by the culinary aspect of culinary travel
Mhm.
that we've been talking about. So I'm going to hit you with a couple questions that are a little bit out of the ordinary. Our listeners here are going to be like, "Wait a minute. I'm used to these 3 questions, but I'm going to ask you a couple different ones. Is that okay?"
Okay. Yes.
Okay. All right. What is your favorite spice or ingredient to travel home with?
I'm going to give you two answers. My favorite spice is cumin. It's in So many different cuisines. I go through a lot of cumin. Second is the dried chilies.
Yep.
And I mean, almost every country in the world grows chilies, and they're all different kinds.
Oh,
So,
that's
and
so cool.
I go to the markets and I find those dried chilies, and I have a huge collection of them
Love that.
that I cook with.
So, what's the country that you think has the best street food?
Oh my goodness, I mean, of course, Mexico does too, but I'm going to say Indonesia has
Ooh,
amazing street food.
absolutely. Do you have, and this could be a really tricky one, do you have a meal that is the most unforgettable meal of your life?
That one's hard too, but I'm going to say a meal that I had in Fez, Morocco. It was in the middle of the souk, and it was very unexpected. I didn't know what I was getting into going through these dark alleys, I was again with my photographer Valerie, and we walk into this very modest but beautiful home that was an extended family. And they had cooked a dinner for us that went on and on and on. I mean, I've never seen so much food beautifully presented, and it was very memorable. And it was just, and the kitchen was so small. It was the size of a closet. And this woman had cooked all that food from that little tiny kitchen. And that was very memorable to me.
Talk about efficiency. If you can cook in that kitchen, you can cook anywhere, right?
That's true. That's true. I can do it. I have cooked, and people, when they ask me to cook for them, they'll say, "Oh, my kitchen is this." I'm like, "Oh, it doesn't matter. All I need is fire and water." That is the truth.
Yeah, we don't even need electricity. You know how to do it
That's
without
right.
that. And then
Yeah.
the last one is, what's one dish from the Hidden Table, your book, that everyone should try?
There is a dish in the Italy chapter called orecchiette with pistachio pesto.
Oh, wow.
It is amazing. It's a pasta with this pesto made from pistachios and Parmesan cheese and garlic and lemon and green onions. It's not even the pesto is not cooked. You just put it onto the warm pasta, and it's amazing.
Oh my gosh, you're making me hungry now. That sounds awesome. Shannon, thank you so much. I'm so excited to kind of dive deeper into the recipe and I always get like little post-it notes or like post-it all the recipes
Mhm.
that I'm interested in. And my husband is going to really appreciate this because I'm going to go ham on the Indonesian recipes. But where can
Good.
listeners find your book? It's called The Hidden Table for those that are listening. Where can they find your book and where can they connect with you online?
Well, I have a website called chefshannon.com. On that website, I have over 200 recipes. And many of those, of course, are not in the book, but that's also where you can order the book and read many of my travel stories. It's also available on Amazon. The name of the book is The Hidden Table by Shannon Smith. I'm also on Instagram and TikTok, Chef Shannon Smith. So that's how you find me.
Amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time today. And I'm so excited for our listeners to learn how to cook new recipes and have a little bit more flexible and adventurous mindset when they travel.
Thank you, Kelly. You're a great interviewer. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you. This has been one of my favorite conversations of the whole year. Chef Shannon blew me away with her deep understanding and embodiment of the intersection of culture, food, and humanity. My biggest takeaway is to pay more attention to the people behind the meals, ask more questions, and just get insanely curious. This will lead to deeper experiences and way more interesting stories to tell. And who knows, maybe one day I'll fill a whole cookbook worth of stories. The Hidden Table is available online for purchase. Click the link in the show notes below. It's more than a cookbook. It's truly a masterpiece. So even if you can't jet off to an exotic escape this month, or maybe even this year, you can explore different cultures and meals through Shannon's cookbook, The Hidden Table, right at home. And I'll leave you with that. See you next week. That's a wrap on today's episode. If you're feeling on fire and lit up to start planning the bucket list adventure you're craving, let's work together. I'm here to manage all of the hassle of planning, hand select your options specifically for you, and give you the inside scoop that no AI itinerary can give you. Click the link in the show notes to look through our pricing and packages. You're one click away from the adventure of a lifetime. This is your reminder to keep on exploring.